Hey guys, tabletop review, the Martiinni Lynx Lumberjack. This is a interesting little 4-inch blade that comes out of Finland. I really negatively reviewed a Martiinni maybe like 2 years ago. It was one of the cheap 420 stainless steel kind of import knives that you often see like in fishing and tackle kind of shops. And it just really was just incredibly soft steel and really kind of almost like worthless for any kind of wilderness application. But a lot of people mention that I should give the actual Martiinni Finland knives, the carbon steel ones, not the cheap ones made for import, a try. So, you know, I slept down it a while and waited like a year, 2 years, and finally kind of bit the bullet and bought this Lynx Lumberjack. And you know, I haven't used this thing a tremendous amount. I've had it like a month or so, and I've really just kind of limited my use to carving because it's not really the kind of knife you're going to use to go out in the woods and baton and things like that. But interesting little knife, so I want to do a little review on it. Let's start. First off, the sheath is, well, it's interesting. It's a really heavy-duty, nice leather, but it has this kind of goofy, kind of twisted leather belt loop, which I could care. Well, I hate to say I could care less. I could do without. You know, it's got kind of this weird end piece, which I think is for catching in your pocket. If you're carrying it in your pocket, I believe there is some functionality to that. It's just it escapes me at the time. But it's got a hard insert in the bottom so the blade doesn't poke through. Overall, really decent sheath if you don't mind wearing it around your neck or whatever. It's just, you know, like this whole twisted thing is not the best for a belt. You know, it kind of makes it sit a little funny. It just sits on your waist funny. So, as I mentioned, it's about a 4-inch blade. You see it has a very interesting finish on it. Kind of rough looking. I'm not sure exactly what that finish is called. It's got this little brass bolster. It's a hardwood handle with a little brass pommel, and the whole thing is peened together, so I'm sure it's glued and peened. Price on these, you're talking 35 to 40 bucks, which is a little bit crazy because your average Mora is like 15 to 20. So I think these things are kind of outclassed by the Moras, at least price-wise. Steel-wise, I think Mora has them on the steel too. You know, they're pretty darn close. Don't get me wrong. You know, they're pretty close. They're both pretty decent carbon steels, and I think you're splitting hairs when you're talking about the differences in the steel. The major difference, of course, is your handle, having a nice hardwood handle versus the kind of injection molded plastic ones from Mora. That's, you know, your big major difference between these. And you're also talking Sweden versus Finland. This one here, I like. It fits my hand terrific. It's definitely not something if you have huge gigantic hands. I have like little tiny short stubby fingers and huge gigantic meat palms. This fits my hand really good, so if I'm really, you know, kind of doing some hard carving, this really locks in very well on my hand. It's got that big palm sole on the bottom, so it's really good lock-in. Really, it's a really good carver, especially when you're really digging in on this thing. So I do like that handle. It's unfinished, so you can definitely finish it with what you want. The spine is a little messy. It's kind of pretty close to a 90, but it's not perfect. It would only take a little bit of work to get that to a straight 90, and to take that, I don't know if it's a coating or if it's just a natural forge scale, but it'd be really easy to clean that up and get that ready for a ferro rod. It's a Scandi grind. Nice kind of, well, it had a nice polish to it when I first got it, but you can see it's kind of worn down a little bit through use and sharpening. So we're going to put this to work, and I decided why not make this a little more difficult. So I grabbed some nice soaking wet wood. It's been raining for about 3 days, and I left some of this wood out on the deck just to get nice and soaked, just to see how it performs. You know, in reality, in a survival kind of situation, you're not always going to have great dry wood, so we're just going to do a little kind of light feather sticking with this and see what we end up with. It's pretty sharp out of the box. I'd say, you know, it's not as sharp as your Moras, but it was pretty close. Pretty darn close. But fit and finish on these, you know, like I said, I'm not sure if that finish is supposed to be all marred up like that or not. I'm not quite 100%. I'm going to zoom in a little. Hopefully see it a little better. Okay. But yeah, you know, you can definitely feather stick very easily with it. It carves very well. You know, like most Scandi grind knives, it, you know, will make a very nice fine shaving. It'll bite really deep into the wood. Not quite getting a good angle here for feathering, but you can see we're kind of getting it, you know. Not bad for just messing around on the table, but this wood is literally soaking wet. You could probably almost wring water out of it, it's so wet. But I've tried some just kind of rough stuff on it too, really kind of digging in at 90 degrees on the edge just to see if it will roll, you know, just that kind of testing. That's the kind of stuff I do with a new knife, you know, when I'm just kind of messing around, carving with it, you know, taking bits of wood off, you know, I kind of, you know, I'll do that, just kind of run it really hard over the edge, you know, check to make sure it's not rolling or anything like that. This is some of that buckthorn. You see it a lot in my videos. I like it because it's a really tough wood, really dense, heavy wood. Not the easiest to work with by far. So here we got some oak. On the other hand, a lot easier to work with. Bites very nice into this oak, I'll tell you that, guys. What a difference. What a difference. That slices into that oak beautifully. Boy, does that bite. I mean, you can take some really deep slices with this, but you can also, I mean, just do some really, really thin. I got a better table, guys. They're doing these tabletops. This thing's a little wobbly, but as you can see, it does a very good job carving. It really, I mean, you can just take a lot of material off, or just a really nice thin amount. I mean, it's going through this like almost no effort, guys. I mean, it's just plowing through this. I mean, my God, that's terrific, guys. That just really, really carves very nicely. It's just like a Mora. You know, the performance on this is, to be honest, is going to be very, very similar to a Mora. So the big question you got to ask yourself is, do you want the nicer hardwood comfortable handle? Do you want to try a different brand? You know, if you are, you know, concerned with budget and money, you're definitely going to want to go with a Mora. You know, just plain and simple, you're going to want to go with a Mora. But if you're up to experimenting like I am, you know, I'm glad I gave Martiinni a second chance. This is a very decent knife. I think it's not worth $35-40 bucks. I think this is a much cooler $20 to $25 knife, but it's pretty cool. I like, you know, any nice Scandi knife like that is always a bonus. Has a really nice look to it, and it's a real nice carver. I took this out a little bit in the woods and just kind of did a little light carving with it, and the edge I think hangs up pretty well. We'll not taking. We're definitely exfoliating. Let me see if I can find a patch of hair that's a little thicker. So you can actually see. There we go. So it's still, absolutely. Let me see if I can get my arm in there. Even after that carving, still shaves. So definitely pretty cool little knife. Edge holdings, you know, decent. You know, just like a Mora. Moras hold a pretty decent edge. So does this. You know, I definitely like it. I think they're cool to try out. You know, like I said, you know, this isn't something you're going to want to run out and buy if money's tight. You know, if you're struggling for money, you know, save yourself the heartache and get yourself a Mora. But, you know, if you got some cash burning in your pocket, you know, and you like your Moras, you're definitely going to like this. You're just going to, you know, you're going to pay more for it. But, too, you know, a lot of people, you know, the Mora handles don't particularly bother me. I've never really had any issue with the Mora handles. But I tell you though, just using this, the handle's just way more comfortable, no hot spots. The Moras tend to give me hot spots. You know, I tend to want to use gloves with them, but this here, and I could do this all day long. So, really cool knife. I like it. I like it. Wish it were cheaper, you know, but what are you going to do? You know, you can't control the market, but overall I think it's pretty neat. You could definitely use it as a small survival knife. You can use it as a fishing knife, hunting knife, you know, any of those things. You could probably do some light batoning with it. Being it is peened, you're likely not to break away the handle. It is a small rat tail tang, so that tang could break. But that's, you know, the price you pay with a small knife. So there it is, the Martiinni Lynx Lumberjack. Nifty little thing. It's overpriced, but pretty cool nonetheless.